Tom Selleck had always been a man of quiet strength, a man who preferred the honesty of open fields and slow sunsets over the flashing cameras that had once defined his career. Even in his final years, when most of Hollywood was chasing youth, Tom embraced the dignity of aging with grace. He spent most of his time on his sprawling Ventura County ranch, tending to his horses, repairing fences by hand, and riding through the valley at dawn. To outsiders, it looked like he was simply enjoying retirement. But to those closest to him, something had changed in the last year. Tom had become more reflective, more thoughtful, and sometimes, more emotional than he used to allow himself to be. He often sat alone on the wooden porch overlooking the rolling hills of the ranch. The air carried the smell of earth and hay, and the wind moved softly through the trees as if whispering old stories back to him. On most evenings, Tom would sit with a warm blanket over his knees and a steaming cup of coffee, lost in thought as the sky changed from gold to purple. It was during these quiet hours that he felt the weight of time pressing onto his shoulders. His health was not the same. He moved slower, breathed heavier, and tired quicker. He didn't tell anyone, not Jilly, not Hannah, about the moments when his chest tightened or when his hands trembled slightly. He didn't want to worry them. But he knew. Deep down, he understood that he was entering the final act of his life. His wife, Jilly, sensed the shift even though he tried to hide it. One evening she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and asked, "Tom, you've been distant lately. Is something on your mind?" Tom looked into her eyes, the same eyes that had brought him comfort for over 3 decades, and forced a smile. "Just thinking, sweetheart. About life. About what matters." She smiled back, but she saw something else in his expression. Something he wasn't saying. Still, she didn't press him. Tom was a man who spoke when he was ready. A few days later, a sleek black car rolled up the dusty path leading to the ranch. It was Tom's longtime attorney, a man who had been with him through contract negotiations, land deals, charity work, and personal milestones. Jilly watched from the window as Tom greeted him with a handshake and led him inside the study. The door shut, and the two men talked for hours. Papers were reviewed, signatures added, and confidential files exchanged. Tom's voice drifted through the wooden door in soft, serious tones. At one point, the attorney hesitated and asked, "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Tom paused, then responded in a calm, steady voice, positive. "I want my family to understand what love really means, even when I'm no longer here." The attorney nodded respectfully. He'd never known a man who thought as far ahead, and as selflessly, as Tom Selleck. Inside his study, Tom had arranged dozens of folders, envelopes, documents, and small wooden boxes. For years, he had been preparing something extraordinary without telling anyone. Quietly, methodically, and with deep intention, he had built a legacy plan unlike anything his family could imagine. But it wasn't the money that made it extraordinary. It was the meaning behind each decision. That night, long after the attorney's car disappeared into the dark, Tom walked into the barn. The familiar scent of hay, old leather, and horse feed greeted him. The barn held decades of memories, props from Magnum PI, old police jackets from Blue Bloods, awards, family photos, and memorabilia from his life on screen and off. He walked slowly along the wooden shelves, touching each item as if he were greeting an old friend. He picked up a pair of worn saddlebags he had used during his earliest ranching days. He held a framed photograph of Hannah riding her first pony. He gently wiped dust off a wooden box containing handwritten scripts and letters from fans around the world. Each memory held a story. And each story held a piece of him. He began organizing items into separate boxes, carefully labeling them with names: Jilly, Hannah, Family Archive, Charity Fund, Special Keepsakes, Legacy Gifts. Nothing was random. Every box carried items chosen with deep thought and emotion. A saddle used during his favorite Blue Bloods episode for Hannah. A small silver heart-shaped locket from early in his marriage for Jilly. Even old movie props that fans would have paid millions for, he put those aside not for sale, but for future charity auctions in his family's name. The next morning, his daughter Hannah came by the ranch. She noticed that her father seemed softer than usual, almost fragile. His hugs lasted longer. His eyes glistened more easily. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked gently. Tom wrapped an arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "Always remember that." Hannah smiled and rested her head on his chest, unaware that her father was saying goodbye in the only way he knew how, quietly, lovingly, without drama. Life on the ranch continued peacefully for the next few weeks, though Tom grew increasingly tired. Jilly noticed he napped more often, and he sometimes held his chest as if trying to ease a hidden ache. Still, he refused to be treated like a sick man. He insisted on doing his chores, feeding the horses, sweeping the barn, and watching the sunrise from the porch every morning. Then came the morning that would change everything. Tom went to sleep the night before feeling unusually calm. He kissed Jilly on the forehead, told her he loved her, and said goodnight with a tenderness she couldn't quite explain. When Jilly woke up just after sunrise, the room was quiet, too quiet. She touched Tom's hand and felt the stillness. He was gone, peacefully, gently, with no struggle, no fear, no pain. Just like he wanted. The news spread quickly among family and close friends, but the public remained unaware until the family was ready. The ranch became a place of mourning. Hannah cried in her mother's arms. Jilly sat in Tom's rocking chair on the porch, staring at the hills he loved so much. The silence of the ranch felt heavier without him. A week later, the family gathered in the living room for the reading of Tom's will. The lawyer unrolled a thick document and cleared his throat. Everyone expected a simple inheritance, some money, maybe the ranch, a few personal belongings. But what they heard left them stunned. Tom had accumulated an enormous fortune over the years, far more than anyone realized. His earnings from Magnum PI, Blue Bloods, movie roles, endorsements, and real estate investments had quietly grown into a massive financial empire. But that wasn't the shocking part. Tom had also built secret charitable funds worth millions for children's hospitals, veterans organizations, and wildlife sanctuaries. He had donated anonymously for years, never once taking credit. Even more astonishing, he had created future donation plans under his family's names so that they would continue the work after him. Each family member opened a letter in Tom's handwriting. Hannah read hers through trembling hands. "My darling daughter, your kindness is your greatest gift. I'm giving you this fortune not to keep, but to continue the good you already do. Let this be your tool to change lives." Jilly opened hers and found a letter filled with love, gratitude, and promise. "You were my anchor, my balance, my joy. This gift is not repayment. It is a continuation of everything we built together." Tears filled the room, not because of the money, but because of the love behind every word. Then the lawyer opened several wooden boxes Tom had prepared. Inside were deeply personal items: a hat he wore during his favorite Blue Bloods scenes, a handwritten journal from the early days of his career, a pocket knife his father had given him, and dozens of never-before-seen family photos. Each item had its own story and its own emotional weight. The boxes meant more than the millions. They were pieces of Tom's heart. Later that day, the family walked together to the porch where Tom had spent so much of his final years. His cowboy hat rested on the empty rocking chair. The wind blew softly across the ranch, carrying with it a feeling of peace. Jilly touched the hat and closed her eyes. Hannah leaned against the wooden railing, tears running down her cheeks but with a small smile on her lips. They realized something profound. The true fortune Tom left behind wasn't the money or the land. It was the legacy of love, humility, generosity, and quiet strength. He had taught them to live with purpose, to give without expecting anything in return, and to find joy in the simple things: sunsets, family dinners, shared laughter, and the warmth of a home built with love. Tom Selleck's passing didn't break his family. It united them, it strengthened them, and it inspired them to carry forward everything he stood for. His legacy didn't end the day he left, it began. And that is why, when they finally looked at everything he had left behind, they cried, not from sorrow, but from gratitude for the life of a man who had given them more than they ever realized.